So don't ask any questions, just close your eyes. Okay, so everyone's eyes are closed? Now I want you to think about, you can't open them, what this room looks like. You may also just think who's sitting on your right and to your left. Do you have a sense of who's sitting behind you and who's sitting in front of you? What they're wearing, maybe? If they're male or female? What color their hair is? Do they have hair? What's on the walls around us? What's on the ceiling? What's the ceiling look like? What's our floor look like? So just take a few minutes and just sort of get as much detail as you can about this room. Okay, so now open your eyes and look around. And how'd you do? Beta said to her beloved, "Oh, you're here." Did you have a sense of who is in front of you and behind you and the right and the left and the ground? It's amazing, isn't it? Just to have what we feel like is in our own mind and then to actually, we're usually right about some things and other things we totally forgot. Like it's interesting to find what things did you leave out in the details of what we left out. So one of the things that we do when we go on vacation, after working hard all for several months and we go on vacation, is we go to someplace new because and everything feels so new and fresh. We give a new way of looking at things. Jack and I often will go away for a weekend just to have a change of scenery. We just want to change where we're looking. But being playful is allowing whatever's happening in the present moment to be fully present to it. 2 weeks ago, in both of Tuesday and Thursday night class, we did a movement meditation where we walked around the block meditating, and which was very lovely. And then I did this quick, close my eyes, open. It was just in my apartment where we've lived for 9 years, so I know it really well, but still it was really cool, like the little details that I left out. And then that night we had class, and we did another walk around the block. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, where did all these beautiful flowers come from? It was suddenly like I could see things that I hadn't even noticed before, because now I was really looking to be, I was just being present, and I'm not even trying. And I've been driving around Jack and Julie, and I'm like, hey, I've never seen that before. And what's that? And they're like, it's always been there, Harriet. I'm like, really? I thought it was just built. But that's the way people who are creative and open and allowing spirit, we always say spirit's always new, making itself new in every moment. It doesn't have any past precedent. It's free. We may be limited by habit patterns, but it's not. Children are not limited by habit patterns. I was just talking to a parent on the line, I don't know who they were, and they had their little kid, and they were trying to tell their little kid to tell me about something that happened earlier in the day. And the little kid looks at me and said, hey, did you see that over there? Like, they didn't want to talk about the past. They were very present in what was happening now. When I went to Agape, which is down in LA, you have a lot of people who are actors there. And they actually had a spiritual acting class in the church because there's so many correlations between spiritual practice and acting, because it requires us to be fully present. And what always amazed me, I don't know if anyone else is like this, but there's so many conversations I have, and then I walk away and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I said that, or I should have said that, or I totally forgot about that. All the things I do in retrospect. But I had so many friends who were just right there. They were immediate. They were just so present with what was happening, and they could respond in the immediate sense. I'm like, how do you do that? And what Patricia Madsen is saying in her book is that it's actually a practice, to always practice seeing the details. Notice what people are wearing. Notice be good at names. Notice the details, and that brings us so fully in the present moment, we can allow spirit to speak new through us when we're fully present. If we're only responding to someone based on what we're thinking in our head, which is probably based on our old habit patterns, we're not being present in the moment. We're not allowing the livingness of pure spirit to show up in the moment. Right? guys are fun. So it's hard to be present, though, because we want to plan. We want to be in control. We want to feel like everybody likes us. And so we want to say all the right things or impress people. So playfulness requires a letting go. And that's a big part of this process. So to be present is to not pre-plan your day. It's to be fully moment. So being present is the first one, and we all know that as a spiritual practice. Oh, and by the way, spirit, one thing we teach, it's interesting. The reason why I'm really enjoying this, because it is about noticing all the details. And in New Thought especially, we always teach, see what's behind the appearances. Don't get caught up in the appearances. Go for the truth behind it. There's a thing called integral spirituality. Some of you have heard me talk about it. And it's taking it to the next level, saying, yes, we want to know spirit behind, but we also want to see spirit in, through, and as all creation, to not have this separation. The book we're going to read this summer, I knew we were going to do a Ken Wilber book, and it's One Taste. And it's really about learning how to see spirit and experience spirit in all aspects of life, not just in certain aspects. And what was interesting is I was going around this walk around the block for the third time, I was still doing my meditation practice, but everything was more alive, and I actually felt more in tune with spirit by seeing the details. I didn't feel taken away from spirit by noticing form. I felt it was more alive. And so we don't want to limit things to what they appear to be, but we don't want to ignore it either, because we are on earth. If we're going to make earth as it is in heaven, we want to see heaven on earth. We want to see heaven in form. So let us open our eyes. I took a very quick class. I didn't finish it because it really wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was a class just telling your story. And I told my story, and I told it sort of in the big picture kind of way, which is how I'm used to telling it. And the director said, okay, let's go back to that first part. Okay, you're in a room, and there's someone in there. What's their facial expression? And I'm like, I don't know. Give me their face. What was going around the ceiling? Did the face change? Can you change it? And suddenly, it was so minutiae in detail, but suddenly that moment in my memory started coming so alive. So being present is about being so alive in the moment and allowing everything to show up just as it is. So that's the second part. So we be present, and the other part is say yes and participate. So saying yes to whatever's showing up. Saying yes rather than saying, well, it should be this. See, our judging mind sort of stops the flow, and that's a big reason why we don't stay present, because we're present for a while and then we start going into our judging mind. It should be like this. And what's really fun to be around people, when I was in LA, there were so many actors and actresses who said church and theater always felt so similar to them. They always felt like theater was church too, because you have to be so present and connected. I didn't use it in the reading today, but one of the things that she was talking about, the difference between improv and other artistic forms which are isolated, is it's about connecting with other people in the moment. And I was always so impressed with how they listened so carefully and responded, and they didn't fight. They're just, yes, and let's move with that. Let's take that and go one step further. And it can, so I told Julian about this. You have to say, I was reading it to him about saying yes. So then he goes, oh, good. Hey, Mom, can I play video games? And you have to say yes. So I'm like, yes, and first you will play piano. But it still felt better. I mean, it still felt better to him and to me for me to say yes, and you have to play piano versus no, you have to play the piano first. There's an energetic difference. There's an energetic vibrancy if we just keep saying yes. There's two parts to the yes, which I love. It's not just yes and then sit there. It's yes and participate. Yes and add on. I love that. They've actually shown that the best conversationalists is not the person who just listens and says, I hear you, and repeats back to you what you've said, but then they add on something. That's when the conversation gets interesting, when it's a true dialogue. If you're just listening, that's a one-way street, but then you add on. I was asking Julian about what play was for him, and there was a part, he was very clear that play was fun because he got to create it. And I was thinking about that. When I pick him up from school, he talks endlessly about the games he's been playing in childcare and recess, the sports. He plays 3 sports a year, and he'll talk about it, but not endlessly. And I was thinking the difference is when he's playing sports, there's the coach, and there's the rules, and the things you're supposed to be doing. When he's playing with his friends, they're creating it all. They're making it up, and that's so much more fun for him. And I think for all of us, when we're co-creating, so that's the yes and participate, we're choosing to do this. We're choosing to create how this goes there. He just had a play date, and the mom was saying, I was asking them if they pre-planned this. She said, Julian and Javi, they had all the detail. They had this whole game going on, and they're playing in this pretend world. They seem to know what each other's thinking. She said they're just in this flow, and I thought, did they plan this? Because they know how to play, and we forget how to do that as adults. We're so controlled just to let go. They're not at all embarrassed that adults are watching them make up this completely made-up pretend game. Sometimes when I walk, I like to talk, and then I think, I should just carry like a phone so people think I'm talking to somebody. Because I'm like, I love the lack of self-consciousness. We get so self-conscious. So we want to say yes and play and participate and create. And he was talking about that even in school, if you can create, even if you have to do something, but you can create, having fun with it. And I think we need to do that. We need to just say, even if we have our tasks list, we call it a task list because it feels taskmaster, but we can always say, I'm choosing to do this. One of the words, I catch myself saying this all the time, and I always change it. I have to do this. No, I get to do this. It's just changing those little words of saying, this is a choice. I'm participating in the world. I get to pay my bills because that's part of playing on this earth. It's part of this playground. It changes how we word things, how we form and structure things with our language, has a really powerful effect of how we experience it. Being loud. Remember she said that? What? No, but it's just the joy of being loud. No, Julian his one feedback at school was he talks too loud in class, so he hasn't learned to contain it inside. So, but we contain ourselves. I love that. That's just like, yes, freedom. Be present. Say yes and participate with whatever's going on rather than rejecting or criticizing or judging or how it could be better. Just go with it. Just play with it. Just, okay, I'm going to do this. You're at work and they're saying, well, you need to do this, and you had something else. Okay, I'm going to do this. Or yes, and I will do this when I do finish this other thing, but always yes. There's an energy and a vibration. We get stuck as soon as we start thinking, well, I'm not good enough, or I'm not sure if I'm, so the next one is, so we have 3. Is just show up and be average. And that's really key. So the be average is key to the showing up, because what I find is that we don't show up if we think we're not going to be good enough. That takes so much of the joy out of it, because if I can't do it really, really well, so we have this idea of excellence, and we want to strive for excellence, but when if we don't think we are good enough, or we think in this particular case I haven't done enough, we don't show up. We hang back. But the joy of being a kid and the joy of play is just showing up even if we're not going to be excellent. I just happened to read an article this morning about the suicide rate with teens is going up again. And they have guards on the Palo Alto train station because they've had so many teens jump in front of the train. And they're having the same problem in Virginia and it tends to be in the areas where there's a really high expectation of how kids do academically. So the places where we have the schools that are rated the highest are also the schools where they're the most depressed. In fact, they found that there was a correlation between the number of AP classes that students were taking and the number of depression. They both increased together. Excellence is wonderful, but it can take the joy out of life as well if we're so that our whole identity comes from having to do well. And one of the questions they were asking in Palo Alto, the kids were asking, is when do we ever get to be kids? we have Stanford in our shadow here, and everything we have to do is to get into Stanford. And Stanford they said, outdid itself. It only accepted 5% of its applications, which 95% were rejected. What about those folks? And how do we take the joy out of life when we have such high expectations? And what's interesting is when we say be average, excellence starts to rise because we open up. We open up and we allow the Spirit to move through us. We had this wonderful Zen class term before this one, and I was so open by what I saw the shift happen in the class. And I have to say I saw some more shift in that class than in any other class. And the thing that kept coming up was, this is nothing special. Even with our spiritual practices, we make it so, including me, make it so important. We got to do the meditation. We got to do our spiritual practices. And we got to wake up. And it becomes like this really serious thing. And as soon as we looked at meditation as, it's nothing special. It's just like brushing your teeth. And you sit down and your mind goes crazy. That's okay. And suddenly, with that pressure taken off of how important spiritual practices were, people started meditating more. Because now it wasn't like I have to be enlightened every time I meditate. No, I can have one bad meditation after another, but I just show up. I just show up. Because it's true. You're laughing because you know. It's one after another. It's not like, oh, I've had one bad meditation. It's like, I was talking all through that one. I was talking all through that one. I was talking all through that one. But you'll find that as you do that, even as you're having what we would judge bad meditation, there's something else that's aware that you're talking all the time. And that awareness is what you're tapping into, and you don't even know it. And it starts to create a power and a presence in your life. So excellence is arising, but not through our effort, not through our ego saying, I will meditate and I will be enlightened and I will not think. That's never going to happen. We beat ourselves up for so many things in life. I'm using spiritual practices, but we do it all the time in so many ways. I was asking Julian, because he says he loves to learn. I said, well, is that play to you? And he said, no. And I said, well, why not? And he said, because then you have to do stuff. In play, you don't have to do anything. You can just have fun and there's no rules. But at school he goes, I can feel good, I can feel happy at the end of it because I got a lot done, but it's not play. And then he started thinking, he said, but I can make it into play. Even though I have to do it, I can sort of make a little game out of it. And I think that's where we want to be in our life, because that's what happens when we get adults. Our to-do list, the external responsibilities that all of us have in this room just grow. I mean, I've heard so many parents say it'd be great to be a kid again where we don't have all these responsibilities. And that's where we lose the play. We have so many responsibilities in our life, financial responsibilities, our emotional responsibilities of family members, our responsibility to ourselves, to God. I have to do up my spiritual practices. Everything is this huge responsibility. How do we shift those responsibilities to be something that we can play with internally? One of them is just to let go of having to do them well. Just show up and do them. And that, it's interesting because I've mentioned before in the Bhagavad Gita, it's all about let go of all attachment to results. And I've tried it. It's really tough. Let go of attachment to all results. And when you're playing, what are you doing? You have no attachment to results. It's play. We don't care. The reason why responsibility seems so important is because it does matter. This is serious. This does matter. Life will fall apart if I don't do it. But if I just show up, she said, like, for instance, if you have this big, overwhelming challenge, her approach to it, Patricia Mattson, the woman who wrote the book, was, I loved it. Just pretend for a second that it's just play. And what would you do? Just take the pressure off. And what are you going to do? Oh, you're just going to do this next step. The next step will be obvious. Just show up and do the next step. And then just show up and do the next step. What makes us... So hell, if we're like... hell would be making choices intentionally to hurt other people or ourselves. And I don't think there's too many people in this room who are intentionally going to make choices that would hurt ourselves or anyone else. So when a friend of mine said there's no such thing as a wrong choice, I think there's the assumption that most of us, the choices that we're choosing from are not debilitating to other people. But I think the reason why she said there's no such thing as a wrong choice is because I think of Dante in Purgatory. I don't know why I'm thinking that. But it's about being stuck. It's about no movement. And the whole point of play is that there's a movement, that we're choosing something that arises and we just say yes to it. We move forward with it. We don't have to be great at it. We don't have to do it well. Just do it. Just say yes. Don't worry about is this the right choice? Just do it. Just go. And if it's the wrong choice, you'll just make another choice and another choice. And that brings this energy and joy alive in life. And that's where we want to start moving to, is where we just keep saying yes. We want, if we don't want to pretend these aren't important things that we have to do in the world, but we want to practice, like improv people practice, just doing them without attachment. I'm going to end with a last story, because this idea of no attachment is really hard for me to get sometimes. And I had a friend who really embodied it. He's an actor, of course. And I don't mean of course. He's an actor, and he's also loved the Bhagavad Gita. And at the center where I was, he created this leadership program. They were having trouble with their structure of how the church was running. So he spent a lot of time creating integral leadership. And he did it, when I say it was over a year. He met with people. He met with the leadership group. He met with people one-on-one who didn't like what he was doing. He changed it. He spent hours upon hours upon hours, all the time checking in with the senior minister. Wasn't me. Checking with the senior minister, what do you think? This is where we are. And she'd be, okay, that's great. And going on, it was about a year later, it was finally complete. He presented it to the senior minister, and she goes, yeah, no, I don't think we're going to change anything. And I had been supporting this person, and I was shocked, and I was furious, and I'm like, what? He just spent a whole year, hours upon hours doing this. And I turned to him, I said, aren't you so angry? He said, yeah, no, I got a lot out of it, and I'm just going to let it go. And I'm like, wait a minute. That is really not attached, to spend that many hours. And excellence was his key, he did it in the whole thing, and yet he could let it go like that after a year. That's what it looks like. He's like, well, I just got a lot out of it in the process. I would have loved her to take it. That would have been great to have been respected in that way. But since she didn't, I'm just going to move on. He just moved on to something else and did something else creative. And I thought, that's the key to living. That's the key to live, to show up, to give whatever we can give. And it's either going to work or it's not going to work, but we just show up again to something else and make another choice. Then we start to feel that playful joy of life. We're not always having to be an expert. I asked Jeff if he had played much, and he said, no, I don't sing out much. Did that stop him from saying yes? Could you imagine if he said, well, I have to do a certain amount of hours by myself, singing and singing and singing before I'm willing to stand up in front? No, he just said yes. That's the joy of living. So that's your assignment this week, everyone. Is say yes and participate. Don't just say yes and watch. Say yes and add on to what your family is saying, or at work, or in some project. Just say yes, and what else am I going to do? Be present in the moment. Notice the details. Do that practice of just noticing as many details in the moment as you possibly can. So be present, show up and say yes, and show up and be average. Take away all those expectancies of having to be great. Just show up and make a choice and do it, and it's all good.